Okay, we now welcome on Greg Peterson, host of the Hoopin with Hoops podcast. You can also find his best bet with the New York Post. Also, if you gamble on college basketball and you don't already follow him, first off, you're crazy, but follow his Twitter at gunit_81. We're recording this at, let's see what time it is, 11 p.m. Monday, December 28th on the East Coast. Greg, how'd you do tonight?
Today was a little bit more of a break-even night, so nothing great, nothing awful. You have those in the industry, but I'm doing great because I'm joining you right now. So thank you so much.
Great to have you, man. All right, so give me your backstory. When did this all start?
This all started back when I was in college. I was doing some work with my local college radio station, and you know what? I was with D3 UW Oshkosh. As you know, D3 universities, they typically don't get betting lines up on a game. Well, we were playing against South Dakota State that year. We took the game last minute. It was just one of those things where UW Oshkosh trying to raise some money. They're going to get their butts kicked. And I thought, you know what? I think it would be very interesting if this game had a spread on it because obviously South Dakota State, an FCS football school. I take a look and wouldn't you know it, 5 Dimes says UW Oshkosh as a 45-point underdog. I was sitting there thinking, yeah, UW Oshkosh, I don't want to take a shot on the money line, try to win a private island for myself. But you know what? $50 might be worth a shot for UW Oshkosh to cover 45. Wound up being minus 120 juice on that bet. But with that said, I wanted laying 60 to win 50. And just before I could place the bet, line had moved. So I'm just like, oh boy. Other people are thinking UW Oshkosh could cover too. Nope, went from 45 to 46 and a half. So I wound up getting that. UW Oshkosh didn't even allow 45 points in the game. They lost 38-3, was never a sweat. And then from there, I'm just like, oh, you know what? This stuff is pretty cool. And this was my senior year of college. So I was just sort of dabbling in that. I would wind up graduating from college, went to Nashville, Tennessee, was having a little bit of a rough go financially. And I was actually betting on some college basketball games to be able to raise a little bit of money for rent. I just remember it so vastly that I was just firing on UT Arlington just every game that season. That was when Kevin Hervey was just absolutely lighting it up. So that was fun. And then my travels take me to Portland, Oregon, where I meet a gentleman that he used to live out in Las Vegas. He would always just ask me blindly, and this was before I was really invested in the gambling market or anything like that, just what I would make the line on a game. And typically I was within like 2.5 points of the Vegas line. So thought I had a little bit of an itch. That buddy wound up moving back to Las Vegas, invited me for a job at a new startup company. That startup company was the Vegas Stats and Information Network. That was about 3.5 years ago. I wound up starting out behind the scenes. There was no intentions whatsoever of me really getting on air, but a lot of people realize, this guy knows a lot about college basketball, and he doesn't stop talking about it. And then one person at the network said, you know what? You should post your plays up on Twitter. That man, his name is Matt Human. So he is the reason why I've become what I am today. I give him full credit with it. And then from there was just a big following that wound up ensuing. I was getting more opportunities to be able to jump on with regards to guest spots, other radio shows, things like that. And here we are today, me firing on every single game, every single day, posting up a podcast every day, and it has been absolutely terrific.
So are you typically up or down through the years?
I've been having great success with college basketball. Now, don't ask me about my NFL picks this year. They were absolutely terrible. I know that many people out there can probably relate. I mean, football this year kicked my rear end, but I mean, for the most part, college basketball always has been my best sport. And the big reason why is because I actually used to be a college basketball bracketologist back in the day. I mean, I still remember being in the 7th grade watching Joe Lenardi and thinking, oh boy, I've got to watch this Bucknell Holy Cross game because Bucknell might have a shot at an at-large bid. Because when it comes to bracketology, you're graded the same if you wind up picking a 1 seed on that 1 line correctly as you are a 15 seed on the 15 seed line. So it's a big reason why I always say on my podcast, yeah, there's money to be made in being able to pick correctly Duke versus North Carolina, Wisconsin versus Maryland, things like this. But you can also make money on Norfolk State versus Coppin State.
That's awesome. So, This may sound dumb, but what do you look for most in picks?
What I really look for the most is just, am I able to get behind this team and are they a trustworthy side? So some of the stats I take a look at, free throw shooting. There's nothing worse than having your bet get torpedoed because Hassan French of St. Louis is going to the free throw line and he's shooting 40% for the year. Obviously, that's not necessarily too terrific. You take a look at coaching as well. Now, Michigan State having a little bit of a rough go of it right now, but by and large, Tom Izzo has been very trustworthy, and we know that that team winds up peaking in March. There are other coaches that, well, they're not necessarily so trustworthy. Leonard Hamilton, back in the day, was not necessarily terrific. Now, I will say he's been doing a much better job at Florida State. I do have to give him credit, but coaching is always one of those things. And then I also take a look at efficiency numbers because so many people are taking a look at, oh, Team X is giving up 72 points per game. Team Y is scoring 75 points per game. But what you want to be taking a look at is the amount of points that they score on a per possession basis, because you always hear that mantra that it's easier to slow down a fast team than it is to speed up a slow team. And that is something that I take into account with my handicapping. So I take a look at those efficiency numbers with regards to my picks rather than just look at the raw surface numbers. And I found some great success with that.
Do you follow any of the public betting and fade the public and all that?
I'm not a fade the public guy. Everything is just purely what I think of a game. I wind up setting a number on a side in total every single game. Now I will deviate from it a little bit because, I mean, let's say that Wisconsin is laying 3 points against Purdue. If the line's at 3.5, it means that it's very close to what I make it, which means that I should probably do a little bit more research to see if there's a little bit more of an edge on one side or another. Maybe there's a little bit of a backstory. Maybe there's someone on Wisconsin that was maybe like turned down for Purdue or vice versa. Maybe there's a little bit of a motivating factor there. So that's something that happens. There are obviously some of these games in which it's out for my numbers. It's an easy fire away. But when you get into those close games, that's when I really start to do a little bit more of my deep dive research. I've actually found throughout the years that a lot of these picks that the line is very close to what I make it. Sometimes those are my best picks because you're just looking for information that you really wouldn't necessarily find on a stat sheet. You wouldn't find in a spreadsheet. And sometimes that could just be the big difference maker in winning and losing a bet.
So give me what's the best year you've ever had? How many units have you been up? Or what was your record?
Last season, I made 301 units prior to the pandemic in college basketball. Whoa. That was by far the best year that I ever had. I was very, very salty when things wound up getting shut down. I wound up stooping to the point in which I wound up watching a few rom-coms on Netflix in April. I never want to return to that because it was a very good run, and hopefully we'll do a little bit better this year.
So dealing with the COVID situation this year, how much goes into no home crowd advantage?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, you still take into account travel, no question. Mm-hmm. When you have like a team like, for example, Rutgers traveling to Purdue or something like that, you're going to take that into account. But we know that these home courts are not necessarily created equal. Now, you do want to note that some of these places, like Texas Tech, we saw it in that Louisville versus Kentucky game last week. There are some fans in the stands at some of these games, but I mean, when you've got like 15% capacity, you're not going to be finding a whole bunch of college kids that are hopped up on like Bud Light Platinum and everything like that. Got to give a shout out for my favorite beer. You're not going to find them just going rowdy out there. It's a little bit more of a wine and cheese crowd. So that is something that certainly is taken into account. And typically you always used to hear that home court advantage would be worth 3 points generically. Obviously, you'd adjust for the camera crazies. And meanwhile, our good buddies, rest in peace, Chicago State and their college basketball
program. Pour one out for Chicago State.
Yep, you were nothing for them because there's literally nobody in the stands. They were practicing social distancing before it wound up being cool. But, I mean, it's one of those things where it really does play a big factor. And I think it's a big reason why you have seen a lot of these stark upsets. You're seeing a team like Kentucky entering into this week with one win, and you wind up seeing Wisconsin a few days ago wind up losing to Maryland in that big upset.
Yeah, because I'm a huge Duke fan, and there's such a difference when it comes to their home games. It's almost a disadvantage playing at home in a quiet Cameron because that when you just hit the rim, it sounds just so loud, and it's awful. Awful. But give me your best gambling story.
Oh, man, the best one ever. I was not here for it, but I know that Matt Humans passed this down through the Vegas Odds and Information Network because it was the first broadcast that they ever did. First broadcast was that Atlanta Falcons versus New England Patriots Super Bowl. So Brent Musburger is doing the broadcast. He winds up finishing up his set. At the time, the Atlanta Falcons are up 28-3. Brent Musburger going out the door, he says this famous line, "Turn out the lights, boys. The party's over." As we know, the party was just getting started. I just laughed so hard at that. It was a few months before I got there. It was a few months before I wound up getting that nickname Hoops from Brent Musburger. I just always think back to that. I know I've had a couple of my own, but that's just one that I crack up every time I hear it.
Okay, so what's the biggest win you've ever had? Are you a parlay guy at all, or?
Oh, I am not a parlay guy. I avoid them like the plague. And I am right now someone that I play every game consistently, but I mean, I used to be someone that I would bet a little bit more on some games than others.
Mm-hmm.
I wound up having a couple successes. My biggest one was that Conor McGregor versus Floyd Mayweather fight. I just wound up dumping out my savings account on Floyd Mayweather. I figured it was the easiest money I would ever get. Obviously, it was. And then there was another game in which I bet $1,000 on for college basketball. And here's the reason why. Florida International was going up against a non-D1 school called Minnesota. I think it's Concordia St. Paul. They're a D2 school. They had won 10 games the season before. Florida International's like 6.5 points against a D2 school that had won 10 games the season before. Line went way out of whack because that school had knocked off UW Milwaukee as about a 20-plus point favorite. We no longer see it where these two D2 schools, when they take on D1 schools, wind up having a line. This was just some rare exception. I see Florida International laying 6.5 points, and I think, all right, what am I missing here? It is under the radar, this D2 school from the state of Minnesota, like stashing Karl Anthony Towns on their roster and waiting for him to get more eligibility or something like that. I wound up locking in on that Florida International, a knows-what winner there. So those were some of my bigger hoists when it comes to sports gambling.
Oh, my goodness. So I talked to you before a little bit. You said you don't dabble in futures at all. Why is that?
The big reason why is because I want to have all my bets just tethered to one specific event, one moment in time. And if I were to dabble into futures, I've actually found that you'd be able to make a little bit more money if you just wind up doing what is called a rolling parlay. I don't know if you know the name Richie Bachelari, but he is very famous out here in Las Vegas. One of the best in the business really ever when it comes to college basketball as well. I mean, the guy is a wealth of knowledge, but what you do is that you just wind up putting down the one unit that you dedicate to a future, and you put it on the money line of the team that you think wins the NCAA tournament. Let's say that they survive in advance. You take that one unit plus whatever you made in game one, and then you just roll it over. You put it on the money line time and time again. And by the end of it, typically you're able to get a little bit of a bigger cash than if you actually put down a future. And what you also get is protection, because we all remember a couple years ago, Auburn was able to make that Final Four, but Chuma Okeke, he winds up going down with a leg injury. Mm-hmm. If you've got a normal future, well, congratulations, you've got a Chuma Okeke list Auburn team in the Final Four. Meanwhile, if you go with that rolling parlay, you're able to say, you know what, I don't like this team anymore. I'm going to walk away from the table with my winnings. Or maybe you think that Auburn is still able to cover the game, but you don't think they're going to be able to win it outright. It gives you those options.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense. So this is Monday night, December 28th. Give me your best pick for tomorrow.
All right, the best pick for tomorrow. I'm writing this one up for the New York Post. Clemson versus Florida State. I'm looking at the under in this spot. Last I checked before I came on this broadcast, it was right around 131.5. But you take a look at the defensive efficiency numbers of Clemson, top 10 in all of college basketball. You've got a guy in Scotty Barnes that's actually terrific for Florida State. A little bit of a unicorn. He's 6'9". He's a guy that's able to draw up the ball and everything like that, but he also shoots less than 50% the free throw line. That is called not good, ladies and gentlemen. This is a Clemson team that they themselves don't necessarily shoot it well from three-point range. I think that they've broken 67 points in 2 games so far this season. Meanwhile, Florida State, they've been doing a very solid job of being able to lock down defensively themselves. I think that this is just going to be a slow, grimy, if either team gets a 65, they'll be lucky sort of game.
But Greg, life's too short to bet the under, man.
It is, but at the same time, life is too short to pass by free money as well.
Do you like a side in that game?
I'm going to be probably looking at the points with Florida State. They wound up opening up at circa a little bit higher than what I'm seeing it right now. Right now, I'm seeing it right around 2.5-ish. I would still gravitate to Florida State. At this point, though, with it being so few points, I probably would wind up taking the money line, but I'd be looking at Florida State just because I do think that Clemson goes a little bit too much through Amir Sims. And with Clemson, you don't have a single guy on the team that's averaging more than 5 rebounds per game. So that is going to be an issue for them.
All right, Greg. Well, thanks for your time. This was awesome. Go check out his podcast, Hoopin with Hoops, with Greg Peterson. You can find it anywhere you find podcasts. Also, if you gamble on college basketball, like I said earlier, go follow him. It's the best money. It's free money. What are you doing? At @GUnit_81. Greg, thanks for your time, man.
It's a pleasure, Carter. Thank you.
Appreciate it.